Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you guys are the ones to specify and to locate and to work out all the nuances and the technical aspects of, again, what light should go where, what kind they are, and how the system is all integrated together. And it's not. I would hazard a guess and say, like, it's not the first thing a lot of clients think about. Like, the clients typically think about first, I needed someone to build my home or my building.
Right.
I need a contractor. I need an
Yeah.
architect to get like permits and to draw some windows and doors, which is a gross,
Yeah.
you know, misunderstanding of
Right.
what we do. But I need that. And but lighting is obviously super important, and it's not necessarily something people think first, right? They just think, oh
No.
yeah, I'll just stick some lights in the ceiling and that'll be good.
Yeah. And years ago, it was much more of I'd have to sell myself a lot more, or the idea of a lighting designer. What
Hmm.
the heck is that? Why do I need that? Why can't my architect do it?
Hmm.
And I would say back in the day when it was incandescent and
Hmm.
it was fairly straightforward, you could. But today's world, with technology and codes, it is really complex. And, I usually sit down and, give them the whole spiel. And one thing that comes up quite a bit is they might not know much about lighting, but they know what they don't like. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, we get so many clients that, oh my God, my last house was horrible. It had these huge downlights and they were glary, and the switching was all goofy. I had keypads and too many buttons, and it was terrible. I don't want that. And so you have to kind of back up and say, look, if you get a qualified lighting person, they listen, that you get what you want, and you understand what you're getting from the beginning through the end, and there's no surprises. That's ideally the way it should go. So
Right.
they do know what they don't like, and that's usually the starting point of the conversation.
I think one question folks might have is, well, I have an architect and they're going to be specifying what types of lights or what temperature of the
Hmm.
lights, and they're going to be ordering, or the contractor is going to order from a supplier. And that
Right.
supplier has a,
Yeah.
lighting expert or lighting designer in quotes, much like
Right.
showrooms have, interior designers in them. Like, what's the gap between going that route versus hiring a professional lighting designer? Like, is there a huge quality difference?
Yeah. It kind of depends on the complexity of the project. If you're doing a small project and you're looking at some task lighting and some down lighting and some decorative or something, you might be able to have an architect who's got a pretty good eye and does a decent layout, and but then it goes out and the electrical contractor might say, well, just like you said, I can get this fixture and I think it'll be fine.
Hmm.
Now the client doesn't really know what that is or what they're getting. And so is the light placement correct? Is it going to dim well? What's the switching like? Is it going to be gangs of switches all over the place? And so, unfortunately, I would say a lot of times the clients are not happy at the end. They don't understand what they're getting.
Hmm.
And then also, what happens is electrical contractors get blamed for the system, right?
Mm.
Well, I'm not a lighting designer. You just asked me, there were circles on a drawing from the architect, and
Yeah.
this is the kind of lights I use, and I put them in. And
Hmm.
so, you know, coming from the electrical background, I'm super sensitive to that, and they're, they get stuck in situations a lot where there isn't a lighting designer, and they're getting the pressure of, specifying products, and they're really not fully responsible for it. So it can be really messy. And I think a lot of the architects over the years and designers have realized that because of code requirements and technology changing every day, that it's really not smart to not pull in a lighting expert,
Hmm.
because it can backfire on the team. If you say, oh, we don't need a lighting designer, and then you try to pull it off however you do that, and the client's really upset at the end of the day, then you have to call somebody like me to come out and say, well, they're all the wrong color temperature. Your switching is really not great.
Hmm.
You're going to have to redo it. And I'm doing that as we speak. I got a call from a client who didn't use a lighting designer, and we're doing their second home, and we're going back to our original house and critiquing what's been done and trying to kind of salvage what we can and make it the best. So, yeah, it's an important thing to consider for sure. It can go sideways pretty quick.
A question on that last kind of anecdote that you were telling. So, like, how difficult is it to come in to a project that's complete and then to redo lighting? Is it just a matter of, I'm trying to think from a client's perspective, is it just a matter of like swapping out the bulb,
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and it's kind of timely. So we have projects that, we've done around the Bay Area for a lot of years, and there's old halogen incandescent projects where there wasn't LED back then. And so clients are saying, Eric, what can we do? The energy is pretty high. I want to update it. And so we've found there's not a lot of products that make good retrofit lamps to replace. And so we do a lot of testing in-house, and we found a few that we think work well. But the problem is you go out and you're putting a new technology into an old fixture that was designed for incandescent halogen, and it might not work too well. You might get flickering, you might get dimming issues. So it's not a solid system. And so we've done some retrofits recently for really good longtime clients. And, I tell people up front, look, we're going to test a few in a few rooms. If we don't get flicker, it seems to be working well with the existing lighting control system. We can go for it, but just, be mindful that it's not going to be perfect, and we could have some issues, and we did. There's minimal load. You have one dimmer with one light, and you put a 7.5 watt LED in it, the dimmer won't work. It'll flicker. It doesn't have enough load. So then you have to change out the dimmers. And so went to another project where I was speaking to the client about retrofitting. And at the end of the day, I said, you know what? We just need to replace all the lighting. And they're like, whoa, really? Yeah. I mean, if you really think about, you've got a 20-year-old recess light, you're putting new technology in it, the control system's going to need to get updated. It might not hold up well. You're better off just, if you can, to retrofit or to replace with new LED technology, and then you're not going to have ongoing issues, but it's a huge expense. So
that's a good point, though, because obviously unscrewing a bulb and putting a different one in, that's like the easy fix, although it has its shortcomings, like you mentioned. But how much more involved is it if we were to go the whole 9 yards? Like, do we have to do drywall work, take out the fixture, the housing that's there, run new wiring?
Yeah, that's what we're doing on this one particular project is, and the client said, oh my God, I said, you might have to take ceilings down in some areas or just do patchwork in others. But it's an important home to them, and they wanted it to be updated, and you get old fixtures in the ceiling, even though it has an LED retrofit, it still has a trim that's, 20 years old and looks dated, so it's a whole kind of industry with the retrofit, and it can be really tricky. And I think lots of lighting people have tried to do it for past clients or new clients, and it can be really messy.
By the sounds of it, like there isn't a lighting manufacturing company that's come up with the silver bullet answer to just easily like fix everything overnight. It can be more involved.
No, and these companies are putting huge amounts of R&D into trying to make this type of a universal
Mm-hmm.
product that can be put into all these different lighting products. And I think it's come a long way in the last few years, but it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be um, the final answer, I guess.
Well, it's a huge technological leap between one
Yeah,
thing and the other.
yeah.
It's a completely different thing. Question: so, who typically hires you? Is it the client? Are you contracting with the client directly, or would you typically be hired by the architect?
I would say, 98% of the time it's through the owner, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the way we prefer it. There has been times architects, it's happened a few times, but there's liability issues in that. Architects, it's not they don't really want to get into doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So occasionally we'd have a contractor. It's kind of rare to hire us because the client doesn't want to have any connection with consultants or the contractors. So, but generally we're direct to the client.
At what
Yeah.
point in the process are you guys brought on board? I'm sure it would vary from project to project. What's the typical thing, and what's the ideal situation for you?
I would say typical is, we have such great alliances with architects and designers out there, but the call we usually get is, "Hey, Eric, we got this great job. We kind of we're under the gun. We're looking to get a permit done, and in the next month or maybe a couple of weeks. Can you jump on board?" And you know, because I'm familiar with so many of the people we work with, I know their working style, and I'm confident with them. Yeah, sure, we can do that. Sometimes if the architect or designer, whoever, has a little bit more time, we get involved right from the beginning before too many people are on board, and that's ideal. But and then sometimes we come in, the house is under construction. They
Hmm.
got the permits, and they've kind of all just, the team has got together and said, "Wow, we really need a lighting person in here to help us out. We're seeing some issues pop up, and we really need to, get somebody on board." So we come in at all different phases, and preferably we'd be in the beginning.
Right.
So when they need you for permits, is that because of all of the energy requirements and the ceiling plans that's required and all of those things?
Yeah. So, working in California is brutal. It's a tough place to do business, and
Yeah.
it's tough with the codes here. Uh, so every few years, there's code updates, and it just becomes more complicated. So uh, back in the day, the architects could do a pretty generic little plan and not have specifications and minimal information, and
Hmm.
and pass the permit process. Now, depending on city and counties, there's a lot of information that needs to get on the drawing with all the information about Title 24 and JAA compliance, and so I'm talking residential
Hmm.
and commercial, but it's just gotten more detailed. And so once in a while we'll help an architect who's really under the gun and we don't have time to do a permit, to give them the information they need to put on the drawings to at least get it started. So
Gotcha.
but in California it does require quite a bit of code compliance.
And that's primarily because of energy reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So they have the Title 24, and then they came out with the JAA compliance, which is, the efficiency of light sources, which
Hmm.
is pushing you to primarily LED.
So regarding the process, so let's say you're brought on board fairly early. Um, I imagine in the beginning of in the earlier design phases, there's much more schematic the discussions. Like, we understand
Mm-hmm.
this area, it's going to be recessed. We don't know exactly what type or maybe the precise location of recessed lights versus, niche lights versus whatever else. And so at what point, I guess, does it become much more technical for you guys where you have to really start thinking about the exact, fixture,
Right.
lamp, and all of that?
Yeah. Coming in conceptually is the fun part, to work with the team.
Yeah.
You get kind of excited when the architect says, hey, we've got this great kind of like concept for the design, and we're going to, we've got these valances or ways that we think we can integrate lighting, and the designer chimes in, or maybe the owner's like, well, I've got a really amazing art collection, I really want it lit well. And so you get going, and then, there's limitations sometimes due to structure or the design of the house. And then you're looking at the codes, and then you're looking at what is the best product that's available at the time. And then you have to stay on the products to know, is that product going to be around for a while? Are they going to update it next month?
Yeah.
And so the technology part of it is where you spend most of your time trying to pick the right fixture to create the lighting effect that you need. And now you've got the color tuning, which is coming on board in a more serious way. You went from static color LEDs where you'd pick 2700 Kelvin or 3000. How far did it dim? Did it dim low enough? Probably not back in the day. And then now you've got dim to warm, which is, mimicking incandescent, which is really nice for people that hate what they think the color of LED is, which is people think it's blue. And then you have the full color tunability that can work for, creating different effects, or for circadian rhythm, or some people want daylight tracking. So it's screaming ahead. And there's a few products out there that are kind of the leaders right now, and we'll see what happens down the road. But yeah, so specifying is the world that we live in as lighting designers. That's really challenging. And then you have the budget. Well, yeah, we love that warm dim fixture that you're recommending, but that's too much money. So, okay, what do we do if we don't have a budget for that type of fixture? Well, you go chase down something that, has a really good color quality and dims well, but it's not warm to dim or color tuning. It's just fixed static color. So
yeah, it's interesting to think about, and I think it's with the building industry in general, to think about lead times and to think about stuff. To think about, these buildings take a long time to construct, depending on the size, and so products like disappear in the course of the lifetime of the structure, like even lighting or refrigerators out of stock, or they stop making things, or now they replace a kitchen hood that's a different size. It's like, why did you change the size of the kitchen hood?
Oh no, it's super challenging for everybody. It's no different than buying a TV. If it takes 2 years to build your house, you're certainly not going to pick your audio video equipment now. You would wait till the last minute to get the latest greatest, and it kind of works that way with lighting. And I always recommend to the clients that, look, okay, we need to get a plan done, a permit plan. We're going to put in this product, but just be aware that there could be something better and probably cheaper coming along. We just don't know. And so you get to that point where, okay, the contractor and electrical contractor are saying, look, we have to order, we don't want to wait anymore. We're worried about supply chain issues. And so you do the best you can at that time that products need to be ordered. And so it's a constant dance of trying to work in the best product at the time.
Right. It is challenging. We spoke about that, I think, with another guest. We used to work on towers in New York, right? So these would take like maybe 5 years to even starting construction. And by the time you spec the fridge or the oven you wanted to use, it's outdated. So like you said, it's this constant dance and chasing around the latest thing.
So like if we, in the case of your example, Marina, like a fridge, if we do a different fridge,
Right.
like no one really cares, right? But for lighting, if you're swapping out with the energy concerns in the
Yeah.
code in California, if you're swapping out a different type of light, do you have to reapply for approval?
No, typically not. As long as it complies,
Mhm.
you're typically fine. If it meets all the criteria of Title 24, if the inspector, depending on where you're at, crawls up on a ladder and checks the sticker or something, it's a compliant fixture.
Yeah,
So
Right.
they're,
yeah,
you're fine.
those inspectors,
Yeah.
they get everywhere. Hey, don't go over there.
Yeah.
Don't look at that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Talking about technology and the switch to LED, how much does that impact the industry? And one specific question on something you said earlier was lights, when they dim, they get warmer. So people might not recognize this, but with incandescents,
Yeah.
when you dim them, they have, I don't know what technically is happening, but they have the appearance of getting like a warmer color, right?
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
so you
That's
were
right.
talking about LEDs that basically mimic or recreate that kind of change in color.
Yes, that's right. So, when we first started using LEDs before this technology, um, most of the residential clients, they like the warm, fuzzy feel at the end of the day. They go into their living room,
Hmm.
glass of wine, they dim the lights really low, and they dim a static color 2700 LED fixture, and you start to lose the color quality and it starts to almost gray out.
Hmm.
So it's gone from at full bright, looks great, got good color rendering. You dim it down, it's like, oh my God, it's terrible. And I did this in my own home and had to come in and put, filters in to warm up the light when it was on the low setting. So manufacturers incorporate two different types of LED chips. Maybe it's on the low end, it's 1800, on the high end, it's 3000. And then they program the dim rate to go from high to low,
Hmm.
and it'll start to pull in the warmer LED chip at the low end. Um, the problem we're having is very few manufacturers uh, do it well. They'll go way too warm. And
Hmm.
so when you're down at the low end, it looks like a bug light. So, um, and again, we have a little lab in our office, and because of my product background and being in the weeds with all this, I won't use anything without testing it in house. And we'll get a lot of claims on products, and you come in and we dim it. We have everything here, and you realize, oh my God, if someone sat in their living room with that thing dimmed down, that's terrible.
Hmm.
So few manufacturers, and we have really good alliances with some of the higher end fixture companies where they'll come in and say, Eric, what do you think?
Hmm.
What's the sweet spot? And that's amazing for some company. That very few do that, but one company in particular. And so we were able to say, this is the range that I think it works well. So, they can set it up that way. And then
Hmm.
with some of the full color tuning fixtures, you have the full range you can set yourself through programming. So, and it'll all get there eventually. I think where this will be kind of a standard thing, but it's kind of in the beginning phases.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I don't know how you would change the color of light out of an LED other than using a different LED that's basically adjacent to it, right? And then controlling which one's stronger, or adding a filter, which always produces kind of a weird
Right.
situation.
So what they do is they do RGBW, which is red, blue, green, white,
Hmm.
and then you have a very sophisticated control to uh, mix those colors. And so that's how a few manufacturers are doing it now. And so and it's gotten to the point where they can adjust the color rendering, the saturation. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Hmm.
And we're using one particular product quite a bit for art collectors, because you can really dial the color in to really highlight the art in a way that is pretty incredible. And we have it in our office now, and I bring clients in with static type LED versus having this tunable, and you can take a photograph and go from one to the other, and it's like LED versus LED TV versus standard, it's just popping. So yeah, I'm hoping that more and more companies will come out with this technology and be a little less expensive.
Actually, this might be a good moment to kind of, if you don't mind, providing a brief overview of what some of these terms are. So there's color temperature, color rendering index, which sound like they might be the same thing, but they're not.
Yeah. So the CRI, and that's something in California, they require the CRI rating to be 90 plus. So that's basically how the colors are being rendered. If you have a low color rendering, you're not going to see the true color of whatever it is you're lighting. And you see that in parking lots, right? You go into a parking lot, and when LEDs started coming out for street lighting and parking lot lighting, they were super high efficient, very white, blue, with no color rendering, low color rendering, and your car wouldn't even look the same color. So the color rendering is really important so that, it's rendering the colors true to what they are. So that's what the CRI.
So the CRI is really more about how the objects that are being lit, how true they are being represented in a certain way. Right. Gotcha. And like 90 plus is considered pretty good.
Yes.
But that's different from color temperature, which is in kelvins.
Right. So Kelvin, incandescence in the 2700 range. So it's that warm. 3000 is in the halogen range. So that's kind of where most residential products and commercial too, that's what you're going for. When you get higher into the 3500 to 4000, that's more for high task areas. Like we have color tuning in our office, and we have more of a 2700 range where we're lighting, our photography and things. And then over the layout tables and desks, we're doing something in the 3500 to get a little more contrast, a little more brightness. So and the higher you go, the whiter it's going to get. You start to go into 6000 or something, you're going to get that blue white that everybody cringes over.
And then, super for 6,000.
Yeah. So there is positives to having, the higher color temperature for, like I said, for task or for work environments. But residentially, you're looking at probably 3 to 2700, and then on down into the warm. If you're, got a library with all warm wood tones and you really want that, warmth, you can get that with some of the lower color temperatures.
Right. And what's interesting is that some of these numbers are they're not fixed depending on like when the light dims. When it dims, like you were mentioning earlier, it can change and become a worse CRI.
That's exactly right.
See, it's so complicated. You think it'd be so straightforward. Oh, I have a bulb, I just turn it down, it just turns down, it stays the same color and everything.
That's why you have experts.
Not the case.
Yeah. The clients, when you start, we're big on mockups. And so like if an architect says, hey, Eric, we've got a client coming in kind of pre-COVID, I'll bring products, I'll show them what a warm dim looks like, or what a color tuning and what a standard looks like. And might not be a perfect environment, but you have no way to understand this unless you're a lighting person, or you're in the field of construction, whatever. So they'll get it right away. Oh yeah, I can see that when it's dim. That's terrible. I don't want that. Or, oh yeah, that color tuning, I have to have that. That's awesome. So show and tell for us, for clients, I think is critical. Otherwise, they really don't know what they're getting. And you can talk all day long about CRI and this and that. And the eyes start glazing over and they start looking at their watch and, can I leave now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we love to educate clients kind of real time and not just talk technical.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Do you guys use is there any good software out there that could, if you cannot do mockups, kind of represent what the lighting might be like, although it's all on the screen?
That's a good question. We can do it with photographs. We've done in-house photographs with different color temperatures on a piece of art. So you could it's not great, but we've done that. Rendering, using rendering software, it's not going to portray it correctly and accurately. It's a good kind of concept, but so really hard to do it any other way than to physically show them, in my opinion.
I mean, it's interesting because I think Marina's question is also interesting because everyone sort of assumes now with the technology and iPhones and like these beautiful Retina screens that, we just do everything digitally, it's going to work out. But the difference between even like the best, Apple Retina, whatever monitor or whoever's making it versus seeing something in person is really, if your eyes are tuned especially, or even if they're just an average client, you're going to see the difference. It's so crystal clear, like in person, the nuances of all the things that you're talking about. So I'm interested to hear more about this kind of in-house testing lab space that you have. Is that where you are bringing clients in as well? I mean, that's the space?
We do. So we have various lighting products, built into our office and the ceilings. We have different recessed lights, warm, dim, full color tuning, standard. And so we have that to show clients. We also have tons of products that we're constantly coming in and out of here that we can take them into our little lab and show them, in a dark space, the differences between products. And if you looked at a light, two recessed lights with different technology, if you turned them on one at a time and looked, and we have a color board that you can see the color rendering really well with all the primary colors. If you looked at that with just one on at a time, you'd say, oh, that one looks really great. Oh, yeah, that one's awesome. But then you turn them both on, and they might have the same technical, they're the same CRI, same everything, but you'll see a difference. And it could be the quality of the chip. And so the side-by-side comparison, every time we do this in-house, we're shocked. We're like, oh, no, that's fine. We think that's really good. And then we bring another product in and compare it. It's like, whoa, that's got green in it. It's got and we're so overly sensitive in our office here with everybody about color and dimmability that it's kind of, it gets a little obsessive. But the clients, we've had just so many experiences over the years where clients are in their house at the end of the day and they'll say, wow, we just don't like the look of this. It's the strip lighting and the casework cabinets it's just doesn't, the wood's not looking great, and it was maybe a product that we thought was the best at the time, but now there's better products. And so it is a sensitive subject for lighting people to stay on top of that.
I would imagine a polarizing question to ask different lighting designers is whether or not you prefer 2700 or 3000. And the rule of the game is you have to choose.
Yeah. It's it's so dependent on finishes. You
have to choose one.
Right. And we've had to do that for years. And sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But that's where it's super important to find out if you can, from the team.
Yeah.
What are the finishes like? What are the floors? What is the furniture? Because that's where it all matters. If it's too warm and it's, cooler colors are going to look terrible.
Yeah.
So it's a dance.
That's a really important aspect. It's just as important as anything else in the structure, because it's that final layer, almost like a lens through which you see things. And when it's not the right temperature, or things are too bright, it's too close to the wall or whatever, hot spots, it's, you go through all this effort. That's one thing we're always trying to convey to clients and people. Like, if you're going to do it and you go through all this effort and the permitting and the construction, years, you don't want to get to the end and be like, I wish I had done that differently.
Yeah. We've just experienced so much of that. I had a job locally that the client had an interior designer friend who did phenomenal work. I mean, it was beautiful, very modern, and they thought they could handle the lighting part, and so they used European fixtures and kind of grid pattern, so it was generally lit but not accented and not really thoughtful of the art.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of the day, the client spent 3-4 years building this house, and they're completely unhappy with the lighting. And so it was one of those things where I said, all the placement's wrong, the fixture type is wrong.
No.
And it was going to be a complete redo. So it's with artwork especially, if you don't lay the fixtures the right distance off the wall and have the right product, maybe you can't light high enough to light the big modern piece, and so you're missing the top half of the painting, or there's so many variables.
You guys also do exterior lighting, right? You were talking about a project where you worked on the landscaping lighting.
Right. Yeah, we do. That's been one of my, I focused a lot years ago on landscape lighting, and that was something I learned in our family business. So, as much landscape as we do interior, and occasionally we're not involved, but most of the time we're doing the whole inside outside, and it's just as critical as the interior can be. It's getting very difficult these days, though, because of the dark sky requirements.
Right.
Uplighting is a beautiful thing, in my opinion, but most areas won't allow it. So another challenge for lighting people is, okay, this area doesn't allow uplighting. They very little path lighting, down lighting, whatever. It's just they want to keep their area dark, which is great. But all of a sudden you used to have this great indoor to outdoor feel where you could look out your living room and see some trees lit, and it helps draw your eye outside, just creates another room basically. And now all of a sudden you've only got low level lighting and maybe path lights and some tree down lighting or something. So it's really kind of curbed what we used to do in landscape. And so it's constantly changing and getting harder to do. And you've got wildlife issues if you're on the coast with turtle. You got bird migration that, there's codes for that. So landscape, I think, is going to probably become less of a thing in the future, where you're just not going to be allowed to do a whole lot. So
right. I know a couple different lighting designers. I mean, not well. I know of their companies and the work they do, and I know, and you guys do very, very nice work, I have to say. But I do know there's some lighting designers where, I mean, maybe this is a good topic to talk about the balance between lighting design versus the rest of the building. So in our case, like the architecture, and I've seen projects where, I guess the client likes it. I guess some people like it, but to me, it feels way overlit. I don't mean just in terms of too bright, but it's like, it's almost the building is just a stage to show off these lights, which could be fine if that's what you're trying to do. But I think a lot of times that wasn't everyone's intention, and somehow it ends up being kind of like this Las Vegas, a bunch of different colors lighting up a building kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I always say, really good lighting really isn't noticeable. You don't notice it. If you walk into a space and the lighting is just in your face, whether it's decorative or it's just blingy, That I was trained, where it's the fewer fixtures in the ceiling, and really integrating the lighting as best as you can, using the minimal amount to get the desired effects, and really blending it into the architecture and working with the design. And I had a client who was interviewing us for a project and was looking at quite a few different people, and got on our website and said, "Oh my God, there's just this like feeling with what I see of like,
calmness.
And I said, yeah, thank you. I don't know how to explain it other than I think it is a very integrated look where we're not trying to draw attention to the lighting. I think that's, as a company, that's not what we're about. Not to say that, there might be a decorative fixture that's crazy or modern or really cool, but
sure.
In general, the architects and designers we do a lot of work with, it's really, how can we do this without a big impact from the lighting? And so it's really showing off the architecture and interiors mostly, and art. It's not about us. It's not like we're trying to, say, oh wow, look at us, look how great we are. We're just adding a piece, and an important piece, obviously. A lot of clients at the end of the day who, we're the last people on projects where we're out there tuning the lights, we're setting the control system. Like maybe the client's been there for a month or something, and they're like, wow, Eric, this what you guys did, we enjoy our house more at night than we do in the day. It's that, and that's the biggest compliment we could get, is that it's comfortable, it's subtle, it's not, glary, it's just kind of integrated.
I mean, integrated is a great word, and I think that can happen, that kind of high-level finished product can happen when you have the right people, first of all, and everyone's getting along and wanting to work together, and that's like the ultimate outcome, right? Even
yes.
Between architecture and inters, as those two professions, to have everything feel coherent, like it's supposed to be together, and the lighting and the landscape and everything else, like if things feel correct, then there's a kind of even if it's a loud design and it's a very the loud design, there's a kind of calmness to it. You sense that, okay, it feels right.
Yeah, and that really is the team approach that we love so much, and got such great alliances with different landscape architects, designers who. It's real. I hate to use fun, but when I started my business, I always thought, when it's not fun anymore, I'm out. I don't want to do it. And all these years, I've kept a percentage of it fun. And we'll meet a new interior designer who has the same philosophy, and it's so great. Hey Eric, what do you think of this? It's great. And so same thing with architects, and so. It's when you get the collaboration going, it's always a successful project. It just, if it's just a client coming in and saying, I don't have an interior designer, I don't really, just do what you think. I don't like that. I want to know that, there's a good team of people on it that we're collaborating with and brainstorming, and that's what makes it all worthwhile.
For sure. I mean, if you're of a certain type of person and you're not an egomaniac, that's the fun part, to see other experts and how they work. And also, frankly, just from a first person perspective as an architect and designer, I don't want to embark on a 3-year journey knowing that we're not going to get a great thing at the end. You know, if we're missing a key team members, it's like, this is gonna be a lot of effort on my part, even though I'm getting paid. It's a lot of effort. I want to know that we have the right people so we can get to that payoff for ourselves, frankly.
Exactly. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to the listening. You have to be a good listener to understand. And I've been, over the many years of doing this, there is a lot of egos in the design industry, and it's interesting, but It's a lot of times I'll meet a client and they'll say, wow, Eric, you don't have an ego issue. I'm like, what? And they're like, God, we've worked with so many people and, they're just
Yeah.
kind of, they want to do it their way. They're not listening. And that blows me away because I come at it from the exact opposite.
Right.
I'm really, it's like, hey, you're paying me. I'm here to listen to what you're looking to do and use my experience to give you what you want or our experience here. And so, yeah, it's always shocking to me and I hear it regularly.
That's good. That's a compliment.
Yeah.
I mean, not to go on about teamwork too long, but I do feel like when we're working with a different a professional in this industry, but a different expertise, and we're discussing something, and we bring up an idea, and their first response is like, "No, we don't do that." I'm like, all right, that's a red flag. Like, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm trying to have a conversation about what this could be, and if your knee-jerk reaction is to shut down everything, unless you're having a bad day, which happens, it's like this is going to be a tough few years to go through.
I know.
It is. And I think the people that I've aligned myself with, architects and designers, they have great ideas, and I'm all ears, throw it out, let's see what you got and let's brainstorm about it. I don't care, if it's really just to get the best project at the end of the day. So
yep, 100%.
So on the designer process, I'm curious, how do you guys think about the space? Like, do you think about the architecture and the spaces as being dark and you are lighting them, like you are adding light to them? Or do you think about them as being bright space and you're turning off the lights? Like, how do you conceptually think about the projects you work on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think for everybody, all the different designers probably have a different approach.
Mm-hmm.
For myself, because I've been around lighting for so long, and I'm a super visual person, I can see a space in my head. I can look at a room, and once I understand the space, looking at the ceiling details and looking at the furniture plans, I have a vision in my head how it's going to be lit up, and so working with my great team here, they're not going to have that same approach, right?
Yeah.
They're going to come at it a different way, and there's no right or wrong. Some people are from maybe more on the engineering side where they're envisioning what the lighting could be, and they go to the specs and they look at lumens and they look at, they might even do some renderings, and that's awesome too. But for me, it's just putting all the information down, looking at a space, envisioning, based on finishes and furniture and what the team is telling me and what the owner is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I can visualize it pretty well.
Do you guys also, oftentimes think that people think of light only being used during the nighttime? Is
Right.
there oftentimes you find using on projects light that's being used during the day to maybe, I don't know, enhance or accent something?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And depending on we have houses that we've done that are really dark. Maybe it's a traditional house and it's dark wood floors, and you have to have the lights on all day the windows are minimal. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of weird to go into a house like that and lights are on all day long, and because you have to.
Yeah.
Dark spaces, not a lot of reflection, not a lot of daylight. And then you go into a modern house with big, huge windows and skylights, and you're like, wow, you don't even need to turn the lights on. So it's so depending on the style of the house and finishes and windows, and it's kind of all over the map. But I would say, there's areas, kitchens and task areas that, you need the lights on, in the daytime. And the nice thing about the lighting control systems is that you can preset, to have daylight settings. Mm-hmm. Like if you, find that you're in the kitchen a lot during the day, the settings for night don't work really well, you could have a button that takes care of that, or you just raise the lights up and down. But it's it kind of depends.
The other option is just you put a big, good old solar tube in there.
Yeah, right.
Tube.
I've seen that. I've seen that in some houses. I'm like, this is great, but also that's kind of sad,
It reminds me of like
daylighting thing. It's a whole nother challenge.
You were talking about testing things in the office and having a good sense, and that's a kind of a controlled setting. I was wondering if you guys have to go on site, to the project location, the property, and the project to get an understanding what the daylight quality is like in different locations.
I would say that if we've done the drawings based, we've done the lighting plan based on drawings, and the house is being framed up, and you're starting to see the spaces, there's a lot of movement that happens at that time. And I'd say a lot of it comes from the client, mostly. Most clients have a really hard time with visualizing. Even if you throw beautiful, and the architects these days are doing just phenomenal renderings. It's unbelievable how good they are, but it's not the same as actually walking into space. So I've done so many walkthroughs with clients where you walk into a space and they say, "Oh, this feels dark," and maybe there's no windows yet; it's just framed and roofs on, but they're getting a sense of the space, and there's no sheetrock yet, so you don't get the reflectivity. But they're starting to have concerns, like, wow, do we have enough light in this space? And then for us, it's maybe. And so there's. Residential especially, it's a constant moving target with lighting. For us, it's clients start to see the house coming together, or we have input and we start to make little tweaks here and there. But it can definitely happen.
It's interesting. So it seems like there's maybe a couple critical points in the process. You have the more conceptual, early schematic, designing, and then you have eventually the kind of site walkthrough that you're describing. And then you'd also talked about at the very end when pretty much everything's done and you guys are fine-tuning. So can you talk about what that fine-tuning means?
Yeah, so I think I don't want to speak for all lighting designers, but that is the key piece. If that's not done, it's almost a waste of effort to pay somebody to do lighting design, because it's all about the adjustment and the scene setting. And our projects are typically heavy on art, so adjusting the art accents are critical, or even on furniture or tables or task, so for us, we go in, we wait till the entire house is furnished, art's up, it's done, ideally. And then we go in, nobody's there. It's, hopefully after all the construction team is left. And we go in, we have the equipment, vans, everybody, all the associates in the office it's one of their favorite things to do, because you could be grinding away on a project for 3, sometimes 5 years with some of our projects, and it's wearing. You don't get to see a lot of end result. So when you're involved in a project for these years at a time, and then you're able to go out, see the furnish, see it furnished, see the art up, it's really inspiring. And then to tune it, adjust it, set the levels, it's really the gratification of all your work comes to a head.
Yeah. And
then ideally the client's walking around saying, "Oh my God, this is incredible." Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's funny, all the years I've been doing this, interior designers are more so involved at the final adjustments, but a lot of architects, they're busy and they don't really want to go out at night. So they're not really seeing the end result. And so we've had a few architects come out where they've broken away from their desk and are able to stop by for a little bit. And they're like, "Wow, okay, I get it now." and it's really important. And even so I've had some landscape architects who do the same thing with landscape lighting, where they pick products out of a catalog and they're beautiful, they look great, and they see them and have you seen these at night? Have you seen what it really looks like? Well, not really. It's like, whoa, so it's the critical piece to understand what is it that the light is doing real time. So yeah, the final adjustments we love it.
I'm wondering what happens in the final adjustments. Are we talking about setting the amount of luminance, how bright the lights are? Are we changing the temperatures? Are we doing presets?
Right. So, most of the recess lighting, that we're using, rotates 360. It adjusts to 45 or 40 degrees or sometimes 35. You have different optics now with LED. It's not changing a bulb to go from a spot to a medium flood to a flood. So you're using special optics that you're changing out to create more of a spot on a sculpture, or you're creating more of a medium flood for a table, or so there's a lot of refinement in each fixture. So, you could spend 5-10 minutes on each fixture as you go through the house, recess lighting.
Wow.
And tuning it and adjusting it to get the proper effect. And then you have, a casework, strip lighting, and decorative lighting, and whatever else you might have. Then it's walking into a space and saying, okay, the decorative's too bright. Let's tune that down. Let's pull up the art accent. Let's tone down the under cabinet lighting. And then you go into the kitchen and you have pendants and you have recess and you have under cabinet, you have vertical in cabinet, and casework lighting is off the hook these days with all the LED options with strip lighting. So again, if that's not done properly, it kind of messes up the whole look.
Yeah.
And so a lot of clients rely on us to do the scene setting, and some clients really get down in the weeds with us and walk through, and they're super involved, and we can download apps on their phone and they can actually do some of the scene setting with the lighting control system. So, it's a lot at the final stages of the job for most of our jobs.
Are you guys using like equipment to measure like the quality of light when it comes to the fine tuning, or is it all using just your natural vision to make adjustments?
Yeah, it's all based on visual.
Yeah.
If we have for a commercial, it's a little bit different. There's required foot candles. So sometimes we're calculating using software to determine the proper foot candle ratings that you need. And we'll go out with a meter and check the foot candles and make sure it's as per design, but it's all visual for most of residential.
Do you find yourself to have clients who maybe reach out a year or two later and be like, hey, you know what, I need to change the scenes. Like, can you do that for me? Or once it's done, it's kind of for life kind of deal?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And when lighting control systems came out, they were a little more kludgy. And so as a lighting designer, you're working with somebody who's supplying the lighting control system. It could be audio video company, could be electrical contractor, it could be an independent dealer. And so what we do here is we design the system, what fixtures are getting looped together. We kind of engineer the whole thing, where the keypads go, how many buttons, what the engraving is, what lights we want to have come on. But they're responsible for putting it into the program, getting it up and running, troubleshooting, and then working with us to set the levels. And so in the old days, you had to do that on site and plug into the processor, and clients just were ballistic over it because every time they'd want to make a change, they'd have to get their programmer out. And it worked the same way with audio video. So over the years, apps are being developed for some of the top companies where the clients now can go into their living room, pull up the loads, we call them the loads, pendants, dining, whatever they are, and actually set the light level themselves. And that's absolutely huge. Mm-hmm. And even for clients who aren't technical, there's something about an iPhone that they can do it. If you told them they had to do it in any other interface, I don't think they would do it. Mm-hmm. But everybody, well, most people really love their iPhone and the simplicity of it. So you say, oh, we can give you an app on an iPhone. Oh my God, that's great. Yeah, I can do that. And then you don't have to have the programmer come back out for basic, programming.
You just have to have a backup of the scenes just in case they mess them up a little too much, right?
Oh my God, I could go on for days about some clients who are, we a lot of work in Silicon Valley over the years with very smart clients and tech people. And, oh, Eric, I'll do all that myself. Really? You really want to waste your time doing that? We can, no. And so they'll have us do the basic, and then they'll go in and start playing with the programming, and then they call back and say, you know what? Yeah, can you guys come back and fix this for me? Or the other one is, I've had some great conversations over programming where I was with a couple. He's a very tech savvy guy, and we're talking about the lighting control, and I said, he said, well, I don't need a keypad or way to turn the lights on. I'll just have my phone with me. And his wife was kind of spacing out, wasn't really paying attention. I said, really? No, I don't recommend that. You really need a physical device on the wall so that, your housekeeper, whatever, your family can turn the light. No. All the kids, we all have phones. We carry them with us all the time. Yeah. And then his wife kind of perked up and said, you want a what? Are you crazy? I'm not going to walk around with a phone, so it's interesting.
I mean, it is a good topic, and the shift in technology toward apps, consumer-oriented applications to control lighting, because it certainly was initially and still perhaps sold as this magic solution that you can do everything from your phone. Your phone's always with you. You can change it to whatever you want. The possibilities are endless. Yep. And
if you run out of battery, though, it could be a problem.
Yeah. So, but there's a number of questions that come with that. To me, the first thing is, I do think that the story you just told is indicative of a lot of situations. People think that it's going to be super easy, and the most convenient thing is to just do it from the phone and nowhere else. And that's simply just not the case, especially in a home set or any setting, but especially in a home. Like, you're walking around, your phone's not always in your pocket if you're in your PJs or whatever it might be.
Yeah, it sounds like it might work to some people, but the reality of it is what I've found for years and years of dealing with lighting controls is, at the end of the day, the clients have been through it probably in a bad way. Too many buttons, complicated. They don't even know which one to hit. It's not labeled. And so they're like, look, if I can't turn the lights on, or someone in my family, I'm going to be giving you a call. If I have to think about it, I've got a crazy schedule, I'm busy. Yeah. If I go home and I have to think when I stare at this thing what it's going to do, you've not done your job well. And so it's really dumbing the controls down as much as you can. And with our experience of doing it for so long, we'll push back the clients when they want a lot of bells and whistles and say, look, if you really want that, you'll find that it's too much. Yeah. Keep it simple. You can always add complexity later. It's just programming. Or if you want, you can do all these crazy scenes on your phone and let what's physically on the wall be intuitive. Mm-hmm. So that's what the approach we take. And as a lighting designer, I always been involved with the lighting control part, because if you don't, and you don't know who you're working with, you're not going to get the desired effect probably, and it trickles onto you. the end of the day, the client's like, well, Eric, your lighting looks great, but I don't know what's going on with these keypads. They're not engraved and no one talked to me about it. It's a mess. And so we kind of had to take control to make sure that we get it the way that we feel, and we give the information to the different dealers, and they love it because they're doing less of the interface, which is the hardest part, either with the client or team, to determine what it's doing. So it's a pain. Lighting control is a lot of work and it's a lot of coordination, but to do the lighting design overall, you need to be a part of it, in our opinion.
It makes sense. And this sort of ties into the whole smart home movement or thing that's being sold, or trend, whatever you would call it. Because there has been an increase in technology and, networking the home, not just with lighting, but with other things with the smart home kind of sphere.
Right.
And, on the one hand, that makes things cooler, but also can make things much more complicated. And I agree entirely. A lot of folks think that it's going to be a lot of fun to manipulate all this stuff every day. But it's like, realistically, most people, like, we're busy. Everyone's busy. You don't want to have to come home and fuss with all this. Like, what are the chances you're going to be able to come back home after a long day and want to play light disco person? Like, it's just not likely.
Yeah. It's been about maybe 2% of our clients over the years that really, really love it. And so, most clients are, look, just make it simple. Just make it easy. And I don't need complexity in my life. I have enough of it at work and family and everything else. So just, and some of these homes get very large with multiple buildings. Yeah. And that's where, so you've got, your pool house and a guest house and a main house, and we do a lot of estate type work and then you've got the landscape lighting, and how are you going between buildings? How are you setting that up? What are the guests able to control versus what you can? And, so it's a important piece. One thing that's just starting to come out now is voice control. So that's going to be, I think, you have it with your different devices out there now where you can, turn on your music and things, but now there's going to be more and more integration, I think, at the lighting systems too, where you can walk into your room and say lights on. And I think it'll get adopted over time, but it's not going to be adopted by everybody. I think there's a use for it. And I think it's just a mental shift that people have to go through,
I was curious, as a lighting designer and an expert in that area, what are the most common flaws you see in buildings or homes or any kinds of structures with how lighting is done? Is it like things are overlit? Are they underlit? Is it the temperature?
I would say that it's done in a very generic way. Probably a grid pattern in a living room. Not specific to anything. So you'll get a row of 6 downlights in a living room, and maybe all the lights are controlled together, and it's not a great recessed light where it might have a large aperture and it's not adjustable, and the color temperature is not great. So you can't really do anything with that type of product to make it better. You dim it. It's about all you can do. You can't adjust it. You can't, so that's a big one, where the lighting product itself is maybe the wrong color temperature and just doesn't have any flexibility with adjusting, and whatever's lit's not lit well. It's, your walls are dark, but you got all this downlight on the floor. It doesn't make for a very, very inviting room. Yeah. Or, projects are underlit. You go into a kitchen and maybe there's these really cool pendants and very few downlights, and the task lighting is minimal. You just can't get the room bright. The pendants don't provide task lighting on the counter. That's a big one. They look great, but they're not functional. and the downlights are maybe, not bright enough or wrong color temperature. So each space is so specific on how it's to be set up. A family room's different than a living room. Living room has much different lighting typically for us than a family room does, where, you might have little kids playing on a floor needing more light at the floor level, and, they play games, or they like to read in the couch and they don't like lamps. So, okay, we'll add some more recess lighting to fill that in. And so kitchens need good tasks, laundry rooms, bedrooms. A lot of people don't like a bright bedroom. Some people do. So that's where asking all these questions, and it's pulling that information out. But yeah, I think a lot of projects are just very generic. Yeah.
That's an interesting way to describe it, because there are like your description of like the generic grid, with an LED you see everywhere. And I think that probably stems from, I remember reading somewhere in, I don't know, some book that there are like rules, you're supposed to follow, like you space your lights out every X feet depending on the ceiling height and whatever. And maybe that's a good specific question, actually. So I'm sure you've heard of these kinds of rules that you're supposed to follow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, and that's a specific example, but are those things, do they guarantee like a decent, product in the end, or like how short do those fall, typically?
Well, I think, there's a lot of manufacturer websites now that actually have, pretty good tutorials on basic lighting, what your task lighting should do, what your accent lighting, general lighting. I think there's enough information out there where it's gotten way better, where there's probably, you get the concept of it versus just, grids of downlights kind of thing, where it'd be great to have an accent light here, or we probably should have some downlights over this counter. So there's good, probably, information out there. People look for it. But it can get very specific pretty quick, especially with accent lighting, how far out from the wall. And I have a lot of architects and designers who, Eric, we can't afford you on this project. We just put the lights all 3 feet out, right? Or 2 feet off the wall. It's like, well, no. How high is the ceiling? What are you lighting? Is the art, 3 by 4, or is it 10 by 8? There's so many specifics when you dig down. There's no general rule that you can use for a space where you've got all these different layers of lighting.
Yeah.
So, it's a little more complex, and that's what when you talk about the need of a lighting designer, that's it.
When you guys work with architects throughout the process, do you find yourself to also look at, let's say, I don't know, like ceiling cove details, and like actually see if, what the architect came up with is working, if the light is bouncing out correctly? Or do you guys even would provide those details? How does that really work?
Yeah, it kind of varies. I would say with the expansion of LED strip lighting, there's so many options now. We're doing a lot of the details in-house, where before it was pretty more on the basic side. So an architect would say, hey, I'm used to doing a cove detail like this,
right?
And they'll show the space and like, hey, yeah, for general glow out of there, it's perfect. Yeah, well, fine. But what's going on now with all the casework where you have vertical, you have behind shelf lighting, you have under shelf, you have on top, you have glowing panels, you have backlit panels, and so this is where the lighting industry is just, there's so many details now. Our detail sheets are just expanding by the the day, and we've had to create a whole database of these where you're datoing the strips in at 30 degrees, 40 degrees.
Right.
They're flush, they have a fascia. So it is critical to work with the architects and cabinet makers and designers to work all this out. It's not just us, for sure. If the architect says, well, we've planned for this type of a strip, and we work with that. If we say, well, that's really not going to work well, we need to change it and do it in a different orientation, then you have to start getting in the weeds with providing them details back where either they draw it or we do. Architects like to have control of that, and that's really good because it's in their package and it goes out and gets reviewed by the cabinet shop drawings and things. But so that's I would say we spend a huge amount of time with all the casework lighting, and we also have a mock-up area where I had cabinets and closet areas built where we can test and verify what we're trying to do, because we've had instances where you do vertical strip lighting, you angle it, but if you walk into a space and you're looking down steeply, you see it. And then the client's like, oh my God, I see the strip.
And you're not supposed to see the strip.
No. And sometimes we just don't physically have the space to get the ideal setup. So,
What's the most common challenge that you come across in lighting a project?
I'd say we do weekly meetings here, and they're really critical for all the associates to talk about what's going on with their projects, so that we all get a sense of what the trend is. And I would say the trend now is everything is super fast paced. There's probably more work going on now than I've ever seen, and I've been through a lot of ups and downs, and we've always stayed busy, knock on wood, but it's nuts right now with the amount of work, the amount of jobs coming in. So when you're used to doing a process, and we have a very defined process here, but the process isn't the same on all these different jobs. You might have an architect that's so overwhelmed that they're not able to keep up, or a interior designer, or the contractor used to have really great guys, and now they're maybe not as good. And so we find that the biggest challenge is once the documentation goes out, is to keep the coordination going well. Because you might not have the experience level that you're used to of the people that are in the field. And so we go through huge pains with our drawings. And because I was an in the field type of person, and I used to see different lighting plans that were given to us that were cartoonish, not a lot of information, and you had to read between the lines. I thought, when someone gets a set of plans, you really need to make it as clear a picture as you can, so that people can understand it. So it's getting the documents out there, getting people to read the documents, getting people to pay attention to the specs, the coordination that it takes once the job gets rolling. There's a lot of site meetings, and so the coordination is the most challenging for us right now to make sure that our plans are being followed correctly. They're ordering the right materials, and there's so much detail now in lighting that it's a very technical field now. Used to not be that way.
Interesting.
Do you know on a typical high-end house, like how many lights there would be? I'm just kind of, because I don't think people
it depends on the size.
Realize.
You have houses that are multiple structures.
Yeah. I mean, it's it could be, 200, 300, 400 recessed lights.
Yeah.
There's projects, around that are 30, 40,000 square feet, and, the numbers go huge. I'd say in the Bay Area, houses are more in the 8, 10, 12, 15. They're not as big as some of the other areas in the country where, Southern California, I worked with my brother who's a lighting designer down there back in the day. And, we'd go to these houses and they were 20, 30, 40,000 square feet. And it was just like, whoa, we don't see that kind of scope here in the Bay Area, so, but it can add up depending on the size of the project for sure.
Do you guys have to have architects have to be licensed in the states in which they practice? Is there something equivalent for lighting designer because the requirements vary per states or?
Yeah, so it has been, you don't need any licensing to be a lighting designer, like an electrical engineer would or an architect. So they came up with the NCQLP, which is a testing, it's a way to get certified that you've got experience, you've studied, and you've passed this test. And, it's a great thing for people coming into the industry. It's a good way to learn, and it's a good thing to do. It doesn't, I'm not certified. I'm so old school that I didn't do it, but people in my office are either have it or getting it done. I wouldn't say it's going to tell you whether you have a great lighting designer or not, but it is someone who's serious about it and has taken the effort to get certified. Maybe over time there'll be more certification. I'm not sure.
That's interesting. I would actually describe the using a licensed architect in the same way. I mean, obviously for certain structures you need a licensed architect, so that just makes it required. But like we were talking in the previous recording, just because an architect has a license, it doesn't mean that they're going to design a great building for you. That's just not the case, Or it doesn't mean also that they're going to do a thorough job with the permitting or the construction administration, or they know how to detail.
That's right.
But it is an indicator of like, well, they're at least on one side of the line, in terms of dedication.
Yeah, we've worked with architecture companies that the principal didn't have an architecture degree. And did phenomenal work. They were more designers and had people who had the degrees and got the drawings done. So, but that's not as common. And I think lighting design as an industry is a little, it's different. People have electrical engineering backgrounds. They have retail backgrounds. They have interior design backgrounds. They have architecture backgrounds. So it's really interesting. And I do love to, I'm kind of working with a lighting group now, some different residential lighting designers where we're talking on like a chat group. And it's really interesting for me because I've always had my head down. I'm not involved. I don't do lunches. I do the work, I'm not a salesman. I'm not a promoter. I just do the work. And so kind of under the radar for years, and to, speak to other lighting people and to, see their varying backgrounds and expertise. It's really fun, but it definitely is all over the map.
Is there such thing as a lighting design degree?
There are companies like University of Boulder and Davis also has a program. I'd say Boulder is probably one of the top schools for engineering and lighting. And it's a great program, it's just probably one of the first to offer it. There's other schools out there. I'm not so up to speed on exactly who's offering programs now, but they have a great program. And I used to have a person who went through their lighting and engineering program. It's great training.
Apart from certification, are there other things, qualities, attributes a person should look for when trying to select a good lighting designer?
Yeah, I think a bunch of things pop into my head. I mean, obviously you need to be creative. You kind of have that going for you. You need to be, a really good listener, drop the ego and get a sense of what's going on. You have to be a good collaborator, you have to be good on the technical side, and ideally, you have experience and referrals. I'd say that's probably a big thing. I don't, like we were saying, education is great, but the proof's in what you do.
Yeah.
If you've been producing great projects and you're working well with team members and it doesn't matter about the awards and all these other things. It's really, what are you doing? Do you have the experience? Are you proving it by the work that you're doing? You've been successful in working with different team members, clients are happy. So that's been my approach, or our approach here is, focus on that first, but the rest of it is fluff, in my opinion.
We spoke at the beginning briefly that there is different ways to lead different types of buildings and programs. And do you think that is something that clients should be looking for when, let's say, they're trying to lead a winery? Should they go with someone who knows how to lead a winery versus someone who only leads commercial buildings? Like, does that directly impact?
Do the skill sets transfer easily from one building type to another?
Right. I think it's a really great question. And, are you kind of more traditional with your lighting approach versus modern? Are you commercially oriented versus residential? And so I would say the difference between commercial and residential is pretty big. And you do need commercial background if you're doing a commercial project. Somebody coming strictly from residential would struggle, I think, to know what the codes are, working with electrical engineers. It's a whole different animal. It's much, you're not dealing with a homeowner, you're dealing with a whole different set of people. So there are lighting people that do commercial and residential, and that kind of gives you an advantage, I think. There's people that just do residential and people that just do commercial. They don't want anything to do with residential. It's too much hand-holding. It's too personal. And it is. But I think it depends on the size of the project. I think a residential person with a good eye could go into maybe a smaller winery project and be able to work with the team and do just fine. They would probably need to rely on some of the electrical engineer, maybe some of the other consultants to help them, but I think it depends how flexible that person is and how adaptable they are.
Right.
Yeah.
And you'd have to do some studying and bone up on codes and light fixtures and that sort of thing. But, I coming from residential background, and I slowly crept into the commercial side with the winery work mostly. And it started off doing small private wineries, and they were very much like a residential project. And we were doing lighting caves way back when it wasn't even a thing. It was right in the beginning of people putting caves in. It was one of the first things I did in Napa when I got introduced up there. And so they were fun projects, a lot of landscape lighting. Tasting rooms were very residential-like. As they got bigger, then you're dealing with big facilities and big buildings, and, it's much more of a task and control.
Yeah.
And so it was nice because I didn't just jump into it. I kind of gradually got into it.
It's interesting you brought up too the modern lighting and versus more traditional. Yeah. That's something that I would not even have thought about, because you think about the architecture first and then the lighting being, done accordingly. But I guess it makes sense, right? You wouldn't lit a building that is, I don't know, more classical the same way that a very sleek and modern cantilever one would be.
So so what are some of the differences between lighting the two types of structures or the different lighting approaches?
Right. Yeah. So it's a huge difference. And I never wanted our company to be specific, like, oh yeah, that EJA, they only do modern, or they only do the traditional. For me, just to keep it fun again, the more challenged, the better. I'm a bring it on type person. So I have interior designers I have 30-year relationship with, one particular, and traditional, and a lot of decorative sconces, lamps, warm colors, and there's art, but it's not a lot of recess lighting. So you're relying more on the decorative side and trying to keep the architecture from getting too messy with recess lighting and other types of lighting so that it looks traditional. So then the challenge from a lighting designer is, how do I get the effects that I want when you're trying to, again, integrate it into the cabinetry and flush recess lights in the ceiling with very small apertures, so that when somebody walks into that type of a house, they don't say, "Oh God, look at all these big holes in the ceiling." So,
yeah, it's like I'm in an airport.
so in working with designers who are more at that level, you have to come in with a lot more sensitivity to the lighting, and then on the modern side, it's a whole different. You're looking at a lot more sometimes challenging details of how to incorporate the in-floor uplighting and the backlighting or the soffit lighting or so with modern, there's so many opportunities, and you see some lighting people just doing amazing stuff with, exterior facade lighting and commercial and bridges and modern buildings that are just amazing. We were, Marcus in my office and I were judges for the IES this year, and was able to look at the different commercial projects, and it's just like, wow. I mean, the integration of the lighting is really, really pretty cool. So you get a lot of opportunities in the modern, but much different approach for both.
Interesting. You were talking a moment ago about modern versus traditional, but also different types of projects, from commercial and wineries and offices to houses and things. And you guys do a fair amount of different kinds of work. And I was wondering if, I suppose the topic or the question is about expertise, but I was wondering if, because you have experience in these different types of projects, if you find that helps you in your lighting design for a specific project. So if you're working on a custom house, for example, that somehow your knowledge and background in these other building types, influences or allows you to approach that problem of lighting a custom house differently than, let's say, someone who's only done houses for the last 30 years.
Yeah, I think the experience of doing so many different types of projects, and I knock on wood again, that we've been able to work with some of the top architects out there, and it's just amazing to sit down and see the kind of see what they're doing, whether it's curving concrete and glass and crazy ceiling details. And so it's just so exciting to be around the type of architecture and design that we get exposed to. And unfortunately, because of privacy issues, I've got so many projects I would have loved to photograph, because it's, of all these different types of lighting, and we're not able to do it. But I would say the experience level, and for me, especially after 40 years of doing it, I don't, I don't want to say I've seen it all, because technology and things are changing. But once you get immersed into it to the level that we have, and people here, one person's been with me for 20 years, another 15. So we're all getting to that level where, having that experience is really great. You sit in front of an architect and they say, well, have you done this before? Yes, we have, maybe not exactly like you've done it, but and here's the details that we've used, or here's the products, and we kind of shy away from that product. This is a better one.
Yeah.
That type of thing. But experience is so great for being able to jump around the market.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think also there's like you said, you were willing to take things on that's sort of in your personality, and that gets back to the idea of being creative when you're a lighting designer or an architect or interior designer or whatever. Being creative and wanting to take on new things is important, because like the danger that we see with certain professionals is that they have a process, but it becomes almost like way too defined, and they do everything by rote. So it's like, this is a rule set, it never changes and is always done this way with this kind of condition. And it's like, that's hard to do, right? If you're trying to be creative and you're pushing things.
Yeah. And I think over the years, we work with some companies, like I said, for 30 years, and I've seen a style begin. And then I think everybody, us included, you start to, whoa, we're kind of doing the same thing here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I try to look at every project as a new opportunity. You know, it's not, I don't take the same specs from job to job and have a format. You know, that to me is, I start from scratch and I look at it all new. And so I think most architects and designers have kind of morphed a little bit, you know, that they have a style, but they're keeping themselves flexible. And those are the ones that are doing really well.
Yeah.
You know, they do have a style, but they're able to move around from one to the next to vary it up a little bit.
Yeah. And I think also it's a personality thing, you know, like you're hungry for the next thing, and there's security in repeating things, but at some point, depending on who you are, it's boring, man.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. That's one thing, I've never been bored in the lighting business. I mean,
the final question for me is that, what are some of the most common misconceptions that architects, designers, or even clients have about what you guys do?
I think there could be a lack of respect a lot of times on people's knowledge base. They might not have worked with somebody who had a good background, could do all the different pieces. So there's a negativity on kind of what you're able to really provide and add to the project. And it's probably because they've gone through bad experiences. And I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, where an architect or designer will say, well, geez, you know, we tried using a lighting designer, it was a disaster. You know, they didn't listen or whatever it is. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, is really, what are you bringing to the table, and is it going to be worth it? You know, do you understand the products? Do you have a good eye? Are you a team player? All those things are concerns, you know, and they all add up. You know, if you're not a team player, it's not going to work. If you don't know the product, it's not going to work. If you're not creative, it's not going to work. So I think there's a lot of hesitation out there because people either haven't worked with enough lighting designers and enough good ones to understand really what they can provide.
Interesting. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. You guys are great.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode of The Second Studio. And shout out to Eric again for joining us on this episode of Design Companion. Helpful tips for everybody out there.
If you like the show, well, you know what? The best way to support us is to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, iTunes. We are also available to listen on Spotify, YouTube, if you want to watch. We are on all of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. A few of you have been sending us DMs and emails, so thanks a lot. We try to respond as much as we can, but it sometimes takes a little bit of time. We also have a hotline where you can text or leave a voicemail. The number is 213-222-6950. You have a question, you have a guest you would want to see on the show, you want to react to an episode, feel free to do so.
Did you mention social media?
Oh my goodness.
I wasn't listening.
Obviously. Yeah, I did all the work already. We've got a lot of good stuff coming out before the end of the year. So I would say...
And the beginning of next year.
And the beginning of next year.
And then the following year. And then the following year.
We've been very busy
and
people.
on and on and on.
But yeah, I mean, again, as usual, thanks so much for listening to this show.
Yeah, I mean, it means a lot, and the outreach means a lot, and the reviews mean a lot. It's all great, man. It's all cool, man. Right?
All right. I love that you're wearing a shirt that says "I love Marina."
That's not true. Lies.
It is
lies.
true. It is true.
Okay, everybody. Thanks again for listening or watching. And we'll talk to you again next week or sooner. Bye.
Bye-bye.